what is regulated. Nagtuturo din kayo.
Yeah, it's one of the mandates of COMELEC.
It's a mandate nyo rin yan.
That is precisely why we have a department for that, the Education and Information Department.
I don't hear about it. Tell us about that.
Well, the Education and Information Department is in charge of doing voters' education nationwide through mass media and through various forms of fora.
May budget ba yun? May ikot ba yung mga yan?
Yeah, it has a budget. But aside from the Education and Information Department, all election officers and election assistants are also mandated by their job description to do a continuing voters' education program.
Regardless of election, they're still...
Yeah, the
but
keyword there
is a
is
different animal altogether.
continuing. Continuing. You know, what you learn as a voter in a national election is the same thing that you need to learn
Pareho lang.
for barangay elections. It's about responsible citizenship. It's about making the right choice. It's about the functions of these elective officials. It's about values. It's about
Attorney, in the old
principles.
days, you used to have the COMELEC tower on TV. You would make the VHF stations and a lot of TV stations. You would have like a COMELEC tower introducing all of this. You've stopped all of that. Why was that? Kasi education din po yun eh.
Yeah, that should continue also. In fact,
even I've talked about that, and you're for that. You promoted that
yes,
on TV a couple of times.
I consider myself an advocate of voters' education in COMELEC. I produced my own modules when I was regional election director of the National Capital Region. We produced a systematic system of doing voters' education. We trained many of our people, even members of different NGOs, on how to do voters' education, and I've been working for that, and I want it institutionalized. After all, it's a mandate of the
Pero hindi nagagawa po. Yun ang naiiba. Right now, hindi natutupad. It's not a reality.
Hindi natutupad. We were able to do it for more than a year in the National Capital Region until I was put on floating status.
We've got to get Attorney Rafanan back here in GNN to start doing this reform. Attorney Sara Lente, do you do education?
Yes.
Voters education.
Compared to PPCRV, we did not seek accreditation for the barangay election.
Oh, why is that? I read that on the document.
Yes, basically because our core of law students, where we have our chapters, are reorganizing into key areas. So they're merging with the IBP chapters and then considering which locations to put their offices up.
Wouldn't you have more problems now because it's local? They say there's more fighting. It's more gruesome being in the local elections. After all, ang dami, tsaka localized, tsaka personal. Wouldn't you be more in demand now rather than national elections?
Yes, actually that's what we're discovering. And now that we've centralized complaints to the national headquarters, so that we'll just deploy our chapters whenever needed, we're realizing that there's a demand indeed for not only lawyers to file complaints and cases against those who are violating election laws, but for election tellers, election inspectors as well, to help them be aware of how to conduct voter registration, for example, how to go about purging voters lists, and that is why we have collaborations on the ground. For example, with PPCRV in their voters cleansing program, we have quite a few cases wherein we help in the preparation, although we did not exactly represent them in filing the purging of the voters.
Is that successful when you purge the voters list? Because isn't that the work of the COMELEC at the end of the day? Because you're still recommendatory at that point. At the end of the day, it still goes to the COMELEC on how to purge that list. I'll give you an example. I stay in a specific village where the association is richer by far than the barangay. So you've got the help basically that live in the village. If you have 3,000 or 10,000 residents in a specific area, let's take for example a gated Makati village, a primary Makati village, Forest Park, San Lorenzo, Bel Air. The residents, maybe 10,000 residents or 3,000, whatever. Let's just stay with 10,000. Then you get the household help that come in. There's 12,000, even more. So they're a little over. The problem is the resident help does not necessarily stay. That's not really the residents. Who does the barangay serve? Because those who come out and vote would be mga katulong, basically the service staff. Now, doon sila nakarehistro. Pero alam mo, hindi naman tumatagal ang mga katulong nila, mga driver, pa iba-iba. Sino babantayan ng barangay? Who is the barangay chairman and the barangay tanod and whatever, kagawad? Who are they responsible to? Those that vote who don't necessarily live and belong to that community, or the other way around? And on purging that list, I'm sure, because believe na ako, people can keep their health more than a year, 2 years, because everyone's trying to go for better bucks. Paano po yan? Sino nagpe-purge ng listahan na yan?
Of course, it is the duty of the COMELEC to purge the voters list.
Kaya ba natin?
We purchased this system which we call the AFIS, Automated Fingerprint Identification System, for 1.6 billion pesos.
Yung ba yung ginamit supposed to be yung optical scan? Iba pa yun?
Well, the biometrics.
Biometrics. Biometrics yung rehistro. Yung registration.
Under this system, the voter who registers more than once can be identified through the fingerprints. Nobody has, no two persons have the same fingerprints. So that when we see two fingerprints that are similar, we know that this came from one and the same person. So, one registration record which shows this fingerprint that is similar to the other should be removed. That is how we cleanse the voters list.
So, we've been cleaning that voters list ever since. In my situation that I was bringing out, yun, voters education, before I move on to the other part, no? Sino ang sinisilbihan ng barangay pag gano'n na sitwasyon? Gaya niyan, San Lorenzo Village, Makati, or any other village. Gated villages are becoming fashionable now all over the country. You have a rich community that can guard themselves, they pay their own security and whatnot. Pumasok ang barangay. Sino ang binabantayan ng barangay? Yung mga may-ari, mga nakatira doon, yung mga residente talaga, o yung mga tao lahat na nakatira doon, miski even with their household help?
Ideologically, dapat pamayanan. And ideologically, maski sabihin mong katulong lang yan, ang tawag natin kasi yan, kasambahay eh. So, ibig sabihin, they're an extension of our home, and we treat them as part of our home.
No, like in my village, nakakatawa, pinag-aawayan ng mga nag-aaway ngayon. Alam mo naman, mga big time din mga yan eh. So, nangyayari, sasabihin ng isa, nagbigay ako ng libreng tubig. Ang sagot naman ng isa, hindi naman kailangan ng tubig mga residente. Kaya naman nila bumili ng tubig. So, iyan ang nagiging problema. Now, the help falls under them because they pay them, their employees. So, what is the barangay there for? For who?
Actually,
I need some education there.
Actually, you know, when we teach naman the communities on the barangay, what we teach talaga, yung tinatawag nating local government code. At meron tayong listahan talaga sa local government code na tinatawag nating basic services. And so, the barangay must be able to cater to that listing of basic services within the community. So, yun ang tinuturo sa ating mga voters ed campaign. Because, of course, not ideally, dapat lahat ng pamayanan, pare-pareho yan, not just for the region.
Ideally, but we have a very funny setup in this country. Gated villages is what it's called. The segregation of the rich and the poor. It's okay during the areas or the more popular areas wherein you really need a community and you need a barangay leader. Then he really plays a major role. The problem there now goes down to the actual election, yung nag-aaway-aaway sila.
Yeah.
We'll go to that after. But pag ganun ang sitwasyon, anong ginagawa natin?
Well, again, what we do in PPCRV sa ating campaign is what we do is two parts. No? The first part of the module is actually what we call situational analysis. Sabi nga nila, sight creates insight. And so what we do, instead of spoon-feeding the people in the community of what they need, what we do is we bring to a reflection. We ask them, what is the current situation of our community? And how can the barangay address these needs that you are identifying?
Pareho din ba education nyo po, attorney?
Well,
ganun na ganun din ba
doesn't
education
have to be doesn't have to be the same. Of course, different people have different ways of
needs,
looking and seeing. So, in our case, in the module that I prepared, we both attempt to awaken the voters with respect to their values and also awaken employees of the COMELEC. Yes.
This is getting interesting. I was hoping we were going to do this in the second part, but let's get right to it.
So, it all depends on who makes the module. The important thing is that the goal should be to enable the voters to mature in their manner of selecting the candidates, the right candidates. And of course, our